I think when you're creating visuals, you always want to remember your brand voice. Think about your goals and think about balance, readability, cohesiveness, color. When you have a set of visual characters, you always want to celebrate diversity. And when in doubt, just hire a designer. We'll help you out.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of the Visual Lounge, where we talk about using images and video in the workplace. And today we're going to be talking specifically about images in the workplace and a specific type of image in the workplace. We're going to be talking about using illustrations. And we've got a great guest to help us talk about and learn more about using illustrations. But, I just want to mention that if you're out there and you've got the new version of Snagit 2024, which is out now, you can go and actually get some of the illustrations that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch that are available in the asset library. So go check those out as we do. But with that said, let me go ahead and introduce our guest for today. Lainey has been creative from a young age and has built an impressive career as a freelance graphic artist. Her experience spans various industries, including agency, retail, and editorial work. Lainey specializes in illustrations and graphic design, collaborating with clients on a project basis. She's known for her quick problem-solving skills and effective communication, with a unique talent for bringing ambiguous visions to life. And I've seen her work, and I've seen her work and the work that she does, and it is really awesome. I'm so excited to have Lainey join us here in the Visual Lounge. Welcome, Lainey.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Yeah, you bet. I'm so excited to get to talk to you because we talk to a lot of folks who are learning professionals or customer education or doing all this stuff that's kind of like involves some of the work that you do, but they're not the creators of like illustrations or graphics. They're designing like flows and experiences. So this is exciting because I see the value of graphic design and illustrations in like all the work that I do. So this is going to be fun. So I want to start at the beginning. I'm really curious, how did you get started and involved with creating illustrations?
Well, like you said, I've always been artistic ever since I was a little kid. I was always drawing, creating, painting. I didn't think I wanted to do it as a career. So I actually went to college and I got a liberal arts degree from U of M. And then the job market wasn't great. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Wasn't really interested in grad school. But I still loved being artistic. And I ended up going to Lansing Community College and taking classes in graphic design. And that was the best decision I ever made because it really gave me the skills to use my artistic abilities in the working world. And I was able to start getting jobs in graphic design, and now I'm a freelancer. I have my own clients and I've built a career out of just like using what I love to do, but like doing it for a living.
No, that is awesome. And so let me ask you on that, because I think a lot of people think I have to be the creative kid. I have to be the talented kid. Did you feel like you were like a kind of cut above people, like in terms of where you're at in your skills before you started this? Or were you like, yeah, you loved it, you did it, you practiced, so you're probably pretty good, but, or is this something you're like, no, I was really awesome and I just enhanced it with a class?
I mean, yeah, I think sometimes you're born with certain skills or abilities, but like you really do, if you want to make money at it, you need to learn. Like I learned software. I didn't know how to use Illustrator, InDesign, or Photoshop. I had to learn that. So it's just like learning the tools that you need to be a creative, like in lots of different industries.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think sometimes we think, oh, I don't have skills, I don't have the ability, but I think a lot of the things people do, it's skills, right? Learning the skills. It's not talent's important. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone has creativity. It's just learning how to hone it, I guess.
Absolutely. So Lainey, when you're working on a project, for whether it's for a client, we'll say for different clients, it doesn't matter which one. How do you start defining success for the illustrations and the graphic design work you do? What makes a project successful for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and as the phrase goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So with art, it can be very subjective. But with the stuff I do, like commercial art, you want it to be communicative. You want the illustrations I do, for example, they have to say something pretty quickly. Audiences these days have kind of a short attention span. So when I do something that I consider successful, it makes the client happy, it meets the goals, and it supports the brand of the company. You always want your visuals to support your brand, which is the backbone of any company or, retail brand or anything like that.
Yeah, I love that idea that it's got to communicate quickly. And I think that's got to be a challenge to do, right? Like, how do you get from someone seeing something in what, mere seconds to help them to understand, like, this is what this is? Any advice for us?
Right. I think it's often a collaboration. Like with graphics, you often have text and visuals. So it's kind of a marriage between the two. You want the visuals to support the text, and you want it to say something. It could be something metaphorical. It could be something literal. But it's always just working in tandem with whatever you're saying. Does that make sense?
It does. So yeah, illustrations are great and they convey a lot. Words are great, they convey a lot, but it's a lot more powerful when you bring them together, it seems like.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Lainey, we often ask our guests for tips to help people improve using images or video in their workplace. And obviously you are specializing in a very kind of focused way on illustrations and graphic design. But for us who are not illustrators or graphic designers, what advice would you give us about using, in particular, images to be more successful with what the things that we're either making or finding, purchasing? How can we be more successful with them?
I think you have to know what your goals are, especially, like I said, with your brand. So the brand being the backbone of like whatever you want to do, you want to know like what your vibe is of your company, for example, like how you like to talk to your clients, like color palette is a part of that. So just making sure you know your goals like as the basis is really going to help you say to a designer, like, this is what I want to do, like this is what I want you to create. And having parameters can really be helpful for designers so they don't have all the options under the sun. They know what they can do for you to meet the goals to communicate with your audience.
Yeah, we oftentimes in the group that I work with here at TechSmith, we talk about putting, I think the phrase was, and I think I've said it on the show before, quoted by Ryan Knott. He said, "You bowl more strikes with bumpers than without." So those having clear guidelines, right, makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well, Lainey, let's dive into a little bit more, kind of deeper here into this use of using illustrations and graphics. So obviously, I think I've seen a trend over, I don't know, it seems like the last maybe 5 years or more. I've seen a lot more organizations turning to illustrations on their websites. It used to be like very kind of photo-centric, and now it feels like a lot of websites are more illustration-centric. So why do you think people are using illustrations? And maybe it's more, maybe it's not. But why do you think that's an important kind of thing to be thinking about and considering in the work?
I think that illustration can do something, not that photography can't do, but illustration can be created really quickly. It can be created on a budget. Like the longer something takes, the more money you're going to need. So you can make simple graphics that stick within your brand's color palette. You can create characters that represent your brand that people can associate with your campaign. I think it's just like a really flexible way for companies to quickly communicate. And it can be trendy, like you said, really eye-catching. Mm-hmm. Like I said, people have you're scrolling on your phone, like you need to see something really quickly. Bright colors can be eye-catching, for example. So I think that's something that illustrators can do that might be just a trend over photography right now.
Well, it also feels like, I mean, obviously, I think there's stylistically probably illustration styles that come and go, right, in terms of the way it looks and feels. But photography suffers the same thing, like clothing, hairstyle. I remember being in school talking about making videos, and they're like, well, be careful because you're going to date that video. You know, there's going to be some trend, you know, and people are going to be like looking at it later and saying like, oh, this is definitely old because look at the shirt they're wearing or look at their hair or whatever. It seems like, but illustration, you can maybe neutralize those options a little bit. So
yeah, and you can update them too. Like you can just change the character's shirt color, or something else is you can create, like photography is, I'm not a photographer, I don't know, but with illustration you can create a world. Like you can create people next to objects and the sizes are all over the place. Like you're kind of creating a metaphorical world that you can't really do, at least very easily, with photography. So like I said, there's just a ton of flexibility with the kind of visuals that you can create.
Yeah, and when you and I had a chance to speak, one of the things that you said that struck me was this idea that the other thing about illustrations are from a, you know, I cannot go to the moon. I can't go into outer space, most likely. There's all these things I'm not capable of doing. It's going to be a green screen and look kind of weird, but your illustrations, they could go anywhere. So maybe, could you tell us a little bit more like why that you think that's valuable in terms of in the design process, or why organizations might want to consider that as they use illustrations?
Yeah, I guess for me, it just goes more into the metaphorical, like you're telling a story and it's not always something that you see in the real world. Like it might be something you just see in your mind's eye.
Yeah.
Like your style, like there's just so many places you can go with stylizing something, I guess.
So Lainey, I want to shift gears a little bit, because as someone, you're always translating people's visions, right? That you're taking those goals, you're taking those visions that they have, which may or may not be well defined. How do you go about doing that when someone, a client comes to you and says, hey, we've got this idea for a project? Like what steps are you walking through to make sure you're getting to a good kind of final product that they're going to be happy with, that you're going to be happy with, it's going to meet those goals and achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, some of that is like my favorite part. It's like the concepting phase, I call it. I think the first thing I do is kind of like pull imagery, like do internet searches, like make a mood board, I guess. Pull imagery, pull color palettes, create mood boards, and share that with the client, and share like a few different looks and feels just to make sure you're on the same page. And usually they say, oh, that's not what I'm looking for, but this is what I'm looking for. Like, let's go in that direction. So from there, I'll do sketches if it's illustrations. Just like, so like for logos, I will sometimes do like 50 sketches, just like get everything from my head onto paper. And from there, you can really go, this is a terrible idea. This is a terrible idea. And then send the good ones to the client. And they kind of, you start from that point. And from there, you can really hone down on the visuals that they're going to be happy with.
So here I am, I'm listening to you say you're doing all these sketches, and maybe like 50, maybe that's a number that you just pulled out of the air, right? 50, but it feels like in that iterative process, are a lot of them similar? Or is it like you're going like, I'm going to do this one, then I'm going to go crazy different direction with it? What do you find works well for you?
Yeah, I mean, you can do stuff that's very similar with like slight tweaks, or you can say, I really need to think outside the box. Like I got to do something way different. And you would be surprised like how many ideas that just branches off from that. It's actually probably a good way for even people who aren't doing creative work to just for like brainstorming, the process of just thinking of ideas for whatever your goals are. Yeah, very iterative. And it's just like a really good way to eliminate things that you don't want and go in the direction of things you do want.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about this process. You're narrowing down all these variations. Obviously the clients probably got input and saying like, yeah, we like that one, or this, maybe they've got a very clear vision of what they wanted. How do you stay up on like, because there are so many different variations out there. For a while, it seemed like a lot of the tech companies in particular were using this very distinct style of person, and maybe it's a particular illustrator they were all going to, but like kind of like people had a lot of curves to them, like like really skinny
and really tiny heads.
Yeah, so how do you keep up with like all the different illustration styles that are out there?
I feel like just looking at LinkedIn and Instagram and just getting inspiration from other artists that I follow, like people's work I see in editorial magazines, people's work I just see on Instagram, mural artists. Like there are certain trends, but I find that if I try to draw something in my style, I see something and I want to like maybe emulate it or use that as inspiration for my own random drawing, it always comes out in my style because every artist has their own, like there's nothing you can do about it. It's how you create things. It's your style. It's what comes out of your fingers. So I find that no matter what I do, it still ends up looking like, oh, Lainey made that. Like people are always like, even though you do different illustrations and different styles, it always looks like you made it. I think every artist has that little signature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And so I was actually just hoping there was like the secret webpage you go to and like, okay, here's the top 10 styles. I mean, they're probably out there, but those aren't usually real reliable. So we're going to talk about the Snagit illustrations you made here in just a second. But I want real quickly, I'm really curious because I think for a lot of us who are not designers, we're not going through this process. And I know you use a lot of different tools, but like, so we've kind of talked about like how you get from the client's idea to start making all these sketches, but what does a practically look like when you're sitting down? Because I was really interested to learn that you use a mouse and your computer, right? It's not like you're not literally sketching. I mean, you do sometimes.
For vector illustrations, I do. Yeah. For sketching, I do use the Apple Pencil on my iPad. I use Procreate, which is just like a digital piece of paper and pencil. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for vector art in Adobe Illustrator, I use my mouse and I click around. It's not like I'm actually creating it with a pencil. But as you saw in the screen capture that I sent you, I did pull in a sketch that I did in Procreate. I pulled that into Illustrator and then I traced over it with my mouse.
Yeah, so I think we can, Lainey, we're going to try something here. For our podcast listeners, we're going to talk over this, so you're not going to miss anything. But if you want to see the video, we're just going to play a small piece of it. But talk through, if you wouldn't mind illustrating. I guess not illustrating is not the right word here. If you'll just talk through for a second, like we're going to bring your video up on screen. We've sped it up, but so you've got the sketch, and then is it just a matter of layering on things here? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, layers are hugely important. So that's my sketch that I did in Procreate, and I pulled it in, and I start creating layers on top of it.
And
so
it's just
that's
shapes.
me creating shape. Yep, I'm just creating shapes with the pen tool, and I just have to be really conscious of what's on top of what. Mm-hmm. I actually don't think I actually use layers in the layer panel. I just know where you can put things behind other things. So I just kind of keep track of that in my head, where all the shapes lie on top of each other. And I just keep the color palette going, think about shadows, think about contrast.
Yeah, and I'm sure obviously we've sped this up, so it looks super easy, but I know it's how many years of experience you've had going through and creating characters and doing all this work, but it's so fascinating to watch. But a couple things I'm thinking about for our listeners who are not, they're not sketch artists, or they're not doing illustrations, but like, I love that you have your palette, your color palette right there. You know what colors are available to you. It just makes a lot of sense that you're able to, you're not looking for that. You're not going off. I'm often going out and searching for like, what's the hex code for that one, or with the RGB or whatever it is.
that was probably the first thing I did, was decide what color palette. And I mean, a lot of the times I like to use a limited color palette or use the brand's logo kind of colors. But for this set of Snagit illustrations, since it's characters and they're all doing different jobs, I just wanted to have like a really broad range, and I wanted the colors to be really bright. So you can see that if you're watching the video, you can see my little blocks of color at the top that I'm pulling from.
Yeah. Well, it's super cool to see, and we'll have that video available out on our social media channels and other places, so people can go watch it in full with music. So it's really fun to watch. So Lainey, as you're, obviously TechSmith, we approached you to create the set of illustrations. Can you tell us a little bit about what did you create?
So for this set of illustrations, I think there's about 45 of them, maybe. For Snagit, they wanted to have characters that are in the working world. So it's lots of different people doing lots of different jobs. They're in different sectors. Like there's some that are just general office, or they're working from home. There's some in finance. There's some in medical careers. There's some in construction, education. So I just like went through and made a huge list of people that I would like to create doing all these different kind of jobs. And the folks at TechSmith really wanted to make sure these were diverse. So we took into account things like gender, skin color, body shape, body size, abilities. So some of the people are representing different abilities, like some of the characters are using wheelchairs. The guy in that video has an artificial limb. I wanted to make sure different ages were represented. And then things like personal style, like tattoos, piercings. So just making sure this set of characters represents people who look like all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, it's a nice focus on, it's not maybe the key, but if you want to see yourself in whatever you're working on, right? Or someone else is creating.
Yeah, everyone wants to be represented.
Yeah. So in that process of, and I know there's lots of conversations, and we don't need to go into all the details, and I wasn't part of all those conversations, but I'm curious, like when you're starting to think about designing a project like this, and you've got 40 some, how much of it is you like just coming back with, in this case, was a lot of you coming back with ideas like, hey, what about these? Or did TechSmith, and I know I'm speaking almost third person because I am also TechSmith, but like, did they have a list of like, hey, we want general office workers, we want to see a guy holding a board doing construction, or was it like you coming back and saying like, hey, here's some jobs I think that would look great in illustration?
Right, that's a good question. They had the list of the different groups, like types of jobs, like construction, education, healthcare. They had, I think, 8 different industries that they wanted represented. And then I came up with a list of, let me pull up the list of illustrations. So like in construction, I came up with a person with a clipboard, a person with a board, a person with like a sandblaster, a person digging at a construction site. Like I came up with that for every single industry.
Right.
And then I just made sure that all of the characters were diverse, and they said, go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. Which is amazing, because I'm guessing it's different with every client. Some clients will be very specific. Some will lean into your creativity. As we think about this idea of inclusion and making sure there's this general representation, I got to imagine there's a little pressure there to make sure you're doing that well. Whether it's someone with a prosthetic or you're defining age or body shape, obviously people can be sensitive to those things. And, I'm guessing when you're as an artist thinking about those, are there things that you try to consider or do that help you to make sure you're fairly representing accurately people? Or is it something that, you find kind of models that you're looking at? I guess, how do you go about doing that in a way that is going to make sure people are feeling good about what's shown based on what they might see in themselves?
Yeah, I think for a long time in the media, like we saw a certain type of person, like a model type of person, but in past years, we've just wanted to celebrate diversity more. So you kind of just think about who you know in your life, like who you see at the grocery store. Like you see all different kinds of people, and why shouldn't everyone be represented in art and media? And so I just kind of think about that when I'm creating my characters. And the other thing I did want to mention too was you can make sure that your text has enough contrast. Like when you're creating things for people with visual impairments, like there's a contrast checker that you can use. And it's really important when you're starting to think about your branding. If you're like starting a new company or getting your logo created, you want to make sure that it has enough contrast so that people who, like I said, have visual impairment can see it.
Yeah. So in your illustrations, do you like, obviously accessibility is important, whether it's text or visuals or video or whatever it is. And when you're making your illustrations, is that something that you're also doing, is thinking like, hey, I'm going to design this individual or this logo or whatever it is, and making sure you're checking colors? I'm thinking, the construction gentleman that we saw on the screen is carrying a board, had the neon bright yellow vest, but is that something that's like, you're going through and making sure that like someone who's colorblind or is having maybe visual impairments of a different type that are going to, your illustrations?
I don't do it as much. Yeah, I don't do it as much with illustration. I think it's really important with text, just so it's readable. With illustration, there can be so much going on. But you always want to keep contrast in mind in general, because again, that goes with scrolling your phone quickly, like it has to be eye-catching. So contrast is important for a lot of reasons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to move into our speed round question here in just a second, but I'm curious, as you look ahead, we asked a little bit earlier about like where you go, kind of how are you keeping up with the trends? Is there any trends in illustration or graphic design that are starting to emerge that you're excited about, or you think are promising, or you think is going to be something that you'll be able to lean into that we should know about and be paying attention to?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, like, something I did want to mention was you talked about how you were surprised that I used a mouse to like create those illustrations. So there's a couple, there's vector illustrations, which is what I did here. And vector illustration is cool because you can size it up or size it down and it doesn't lose integrity. Like it doesn't get pixelated. And then there's like the other kind of illustration, which is what people use Photoshop or Procreate for. So that is pixel based, and that is a lot more dependent on the size that the piece is going to, like if it's going to be printed, like you really have to know how big it's going to be. So I think probably vector illustration answers that question, because you're creating something flat and simple and often bright colors, and it just comes across really quickly to the eye. So that might be a trend, but it also could have been around for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a whole tutorial and or episode where we could just talk about file formats and styles. But I think we'll save that for another day, but the reason I asked that question is because I think it's always interesting to see where design trends are going, right? Like to know like, hey, what's up and coming? And I do think vectors, I think it's pretty widely used, but not everybody. I'm guessing there's people on the show who are listening to this who don't know. You use the word vector and they might not understand what that means. And so
it's also easier to animate vector art. I'm not an animator, but I have a little bit of experience with motion graphics. So motion graphics is probably where trends are going. Moving your illustrations around, creating characters that are moving around. And it's easier to do that cleanly with vector graphics.
Absolutely. Get them all positioned and get them in different settings and all that good stuff. So, well, Lainey, we're going to move on to our speed round questions. For people who have not listened to the show, speed round questions are quick questions with quick answers, and we determine them by the roll of a die. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, Lainey, I know you've prepared for these. You've got 12 questions. They could be any one, but we're going to go ahead and go over to our dice cam. Are you ready for the first roll?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. First one is down, and that is, it looks like a 1. I'm just going to, no, it's a 7. It's hard to see, but it is a 7. So question number 7. What's a hobby or interest you've always wanted to pursue but haven't had the chance yet? So you obviously, a lot of people would say, oh, I would love to pursue sketching or drawing. You do that for your career. Is there a hobby that you would love to pursue that you haven't had a chance to do?
I have 2 answers for this. I'll make it quick, but my first answer is playing the guitar. I've always wanted to learn how to play the guitar. I don't think I'm a very musically inclined person, but it's on my bucket list. And the other thing actually has to do with sketching and drawing. I've always been interested in illustrating children's books. A lot of my art is very kid-facing or fun, appeals to kids anyway. I haven't checked that one off the list yet.
All right. Well, that would be awesome. And if you do, let us know, because we'd love to share that out. Because, yeah, I love, every kid's book needs good illustration. It's just part of the rules, I think. All right. Well, back to our dice cam. Here we go. Ready for your next roll. And this one is, wow, this is 2 recordings I've had in a row.
7 again.
Can't do that again. So, but although you did give us 2 answers, so let's try it again here. Okay, that is a 9. Just gonna, yep, the line is underneath can't see it in the camera, but it's right underneath the lower whatever thing that's called. So number 9 is, what's the one thing you're most proud of in your career? You've made a lot of stuff, so what's the one thing you're most proud of?
Yeah, it's not any one project in particular. I would say I'm most proud of becoming self-employed and being my own boss. It's not easy, but it's very rewarding. I have my own clients. I set my own schedule. I pay my own taxes. I love being self-employed. I don't think I could ever go back to working for one company. I get to work with lots of different people and lots of different companies, and I love it.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that answer. It's a great answer, and congratulations for you for being able to do that. I'm sure some of our listeners would say, I want to do that. I wish I had that ability. So great answer. So, okay, here we go. Last one. We're going to roll it again. Number 1. Perfect. Now it's truly a 1 this time. So if you could, this is maybe a little different. We changed these questions not too long ago, but if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why? So is there anybody in your bucket list?
For some reason was the hardest question for me to answer. The first person that came to mind is not a historical figure. It was Jack Black.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take it.
I love him. I think he's hilarious. But if I did have to have dinner with a historical figure, I was thinking it would be cool. I mean, it doesn't even have to be anyone famous, but like someone in ancient times, like ancient Rome, or like a feudal system, or someone just like that lived through the American Civil War. Like, what was it like to live in those times? Like, everything was so different.
Yeah.
We didn't have modern technology. I don't know. I'm just interested in what it was like to live way back when.
I love it.
What did you use for drawing? Like,
yeah. Well,
tell me what it was like to make cave paintings.
I was thinking, like, if you didn't have an answer, I was like, think about all the great artists that have done things. I mean, even just illustrators I'm sure we could think of a few illustrators who've done crazy.
Oh yeah, I wrote down Da Vinci, Michelangelo,
Yeah. And we'll take Jack Black as an answer
things
too.
Things were different.
Jack, I mean, look, he's not historical yet, but he will be. He is.
He will be.
Well, Lainey, this has been just awesome. Thank you for sharing your insights and your thoughts with us about creating illustrations and some of your process. Before we wrap up, if people want to learn more, if maybe they want to work with you, how might they do that?
My portfolio website is LaineyYehl.com, and I'm on Instagram at Lainey May. I'm always on LinkedIn. That's where I connect with a lot of people. So you can find me at one of those places.
Awesome. And we will make sure those are in the show notes so people can just click on them so it's easy to go. Well, Lainey, as we wrap up the show, we always ask our guests for their final take. So, Lainey, what is your final take from today's show?
I think when you're creating visuals, you always want to remember your brand voice. Think about your goals and think about balance, readability, cohesiveness, color. When you have a set of visual characters, you always want to celebrate diversity. And when in doubt, just hire a designer. We'll help you out.
Fantastic. Well, Lainey, thank you so much for being a guest on the Visual Lounge.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, thanks to Lainey. I mean, what a great topic. And I hope you took some ideas away, thoughts about how you might use illustration, how you might go about creating illustration. If you don't know how to, I know a great designer who can help you out. She's more than willing to work with you, I'm sure. But just, what we want to think about here on the Visual Lounge is, enhancing not only just the things that you can do with the TechSmith tools. Those are really great. But the reason we have these illustrations created is because you can use those in your screenshots. You can use those in the videos that you're making, in your simple videos in Snagit, or if you want to pull them in the Camtasia, no one's going to stop you. You can do that too, because you can use them to really enhance the message that you want to have and share with your audience. And of course, I love what Lainey's talking about, the practices she put in, tools that she had to learn. We're big fans of always taking a little bit of time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you all next time.